The helicopter was fueled, waiting. The pilot, gone. On a rooftop high above Seattle, CEO Vivian Cross was seconds from losing a multi-million-dollar deal until a janitor in a sweat-soaked uniform stepped forward and said, "I can fly it." Her executives laughed. She didn't. She looked him in the eye and said, "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." He just nodded. The Seattle skyline shimmered with glass and tension. 35 stories above the chaos, Vivian Cross, CEO of Cross-Flight Aerospace, stood on the rooftop helipad, her jaw tight, her heels echoing on concrete with every impatient step. The helicopter beside her purred softly, fully fueled. Blades still, but the pilot, a trusted contractor brought in for this one mission-critical flight, had just texted from the ER, his wrist fractured in a fender bender. Vivian's heart slammed against her ribs. They were minutes away from disaster. "Everyone's booked," muttered Benji, her assistant, face pale under the harsh sunlight. "Private charters are grounded or across the border in Vancouver. Then find someone else," she snapped. Clarissa Vale, executive VP and gatekeeper of all Vivian's chaos, lowered her phone. "There is no one else. Either we drive, which means we're late, or we reschedule." Vivian's voice dropped. "Rescheduling kills this deal. You know that." Silence. Then, from the stairwell, a voice, calm, steady, almost too quiet for the whir of the wind. "I can fly it." They all turned. A tall, black man emerged from the shadows, mop in one hand, his grey janitor's uniform streaked with sweat. His name tag read, Malik. Clarissa raised an eyebrow. "You?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Vivian narrowed her eyes. Something in his voice, clean, practiced, confident, clashed with everything he wore. She folded her arms. "Fly this helicopter," she said coldly, "and I'll marry you." Malik didn't blink. "Okay." Then he walked to the cockpit. Vivian didn't move for 5 full seconds. The words she had spoken, sharp, sarcastic, impossible, were still hanging between them like smoke. Yet Malik had caught them with perfect stillness, entered them with nothing but clarity, and now he was halfway across the rooftop, walking toward the cockpit like he'd owned it his entire life. Clarissa let out an incredulous laugh behind her. "Vivian, be serious. That's Malik, the janitor." "I know who he is," Vivian replied curtly, though the truth was she didn't. Not really. She'd seen him in passing, maybe held a door open once, maybe nodded from across the marble lobby. She'd never heard him speak until now. And she hadn't expected his voice to carry that kind of weight. Benji leaned in, whispering nervously, "Is this like a joke?" "You don't really think—" "I think he just got into my helicopter," Vivian said, already crossing the rooftop. The aircraft's blades began to rotate, slow at first. She felt the familiar thrum beneath her heels as she neared the passenger side door. Malik was already strapped in, flipping switches and adjusting controls with movements that were far too crisp to be random. She paused at the door, catching his eyes through the windshield. Calm, precise, not a smirk to be found. "Are you serious about this?" she asked, yelling a little over the rising engine. "Can you really fly?" Malik tapped the headset, gesturing for her to put hers on. "We don't have much time," he said through the audio channel, now cool and professional. "You want to make your deal or not?" Vivian hesitated. Every protocol screamed no. Every gut instinct screamed what if. She got in, shutting the door behind her. The blades roared louder. The rooftop fell away. She gripped the edge of her seat. Across from her, a janitor flew like a ghost, reclaiming the sky. Vivian had flown hundreds of times. In jets, in chartered helicopters, even in cockpits beside seasoned test engineers. She had seen storm turbulence over the Atlantic and white-knuckle landings in Colorado snow. But never in her life had she felt what she did sitting beside Malik Bennett. He flew with absolute calm. No wasted movements, no showmanship, just steady hands and surgical precision. Every altitude correction, every turn, it felt like the aircraft was listening to him, not the other way around. And he didn't say a word he didn't need to. The city unfurled below them in ribbons of highway and streaks of water, and Vivian, for once, had nothing to say. She kept stealing glances at him, his grip on the collective, his posture, the sharp focus in his eyes that didn't match anything about a janitor's uniform. Her earlier joke played over in her head, and she found herself cringing. "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." What cruel, flippant thing had she said? And why had he agreed like it was nothing? The landing approached fast, Skycorps HQ's private airfield. Violet lights flanking the pad, execs already gathered below. Malik brought the Bell 407 down like a feather, smooth as silk. Not a jolt, not a wobble, just grace. Vivian stepped out in silence. The Skycorps team was already smiling and waving, ready for handshakes and signatures. But she turned back for just 1 second. Malik hadn't moved. He sat still in the cockpit, eyes on the horizon. Like he'd never left it. "Who are you?" she whispered aloud, too softly for anyone to hear, but something inside her already knew. This man didn't belong to the background. He'd come from somewhere past the skyline, and he flew like someone who used to matter. The signing went off without a hitch. Skycorps' Chief Innovation Officer shook Vivian's hand so hard she thought he'd dislocate her elbow. The contract was finalized, numbers exchanged, cameras flashed, and just like that she'd secured the most significant deal of her career. But Vivian Cross barely heard the congratulations, because in the back of her mind, one thought clung to her like static: who flies like that? She returned to CrossFlight headquarters hours later, stepping into the executive floor as the sunset bled into the skyline. The helicopter, the same one Malik had flown, sat quietly on its rooftop pad now, still calm, as though it hadn't ferried her across the city against every odd. She didn't know what she was doing when she walked straight to her desk, kicked off her heels, and opened the company's internal employee directory. The name Malik Bennett came up with one click. Hired 8 months ago. Assigned janitorial responsibilities to the executive floors. Night shift staff. No notable complaints, no warnings, nothing handwritten. Just bland entries in HR's digital system. No résumé en fil. Just a completed background check with a green, clear status. Vivian stared at the screen. It told her nothing and everything. This was the kind of file people created when they didn't want to be seen. She leaned back, fingers now drumming her desk. No average janitor could land a corporate helicopter like that. No civilian with YouTube confidence could move with that kind of instinct. This wasn't hobbyist-level flying. This was muscle memory born in war zones. Chaos, experience. So she picked up her phone and dialed someone she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. "Viv," said the voice on the other end. A smooth baritone layered with caution. "I need a favor," she said, skipping greetings. "Military records." "Someone named Malik Bennett," a pause. "You finally dating again or running background checks on your cleaning crew?" Vivian didn't blink. "Just look him up." He sighed but agreed. 2 hours later, her phone lit up. "You sitting down?" Her contact asked. Not really her style. Why? Because that janitor. He's a war hero. And just like that, nothing about today made sense anymore. For most of her career, Vivian Cross thrived on numbers. Projections, year-end reports, contract margins. Clean, predictable. But the file she received 20 minutes after her call wasn't numbers. It was a gut punch wrapped in military decorum. Malik Leon Bennett, Captain. U.S. Army Rotorcraft Division 2 tours overseas, commendations, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal, Bronze Star, Medal of Valor. She read those words 5 times. Then came the mission summaries. Desert evacuations, casualty extractions under enemy fire. One report cited a nighttime assault where Malik flew a Black Hawk into an active war zone to recover 6 stranded medics. They'd lived because of him. He received the Medal of Valor for that flight. She scrolled further. His discharge report stopped her cold. Reason, family hardship. Status, honorable voluntary. Below that, a note: spouse deceased in auto accident. Child in neonatal ICU. Service interruption requested and approved. Vivian sat frozen in her chair. He'd left his career, walked away from praise and purpose, not for failure, but for grief. He didn't run because he broke. He ran because someone else did, and no one else could carry what was left. She remembered the look in his eyes that morning. No fear, just stillness. A man who had already flown through worse, and no one at her company even knew. He mopped floors at night, like he was trying to disappear. And they let him. She let him. She remembered once seeing him pick up a tiny blonde boy after hours, quiet as shadows, crayon notebook tucked under a fragile arm. His son, she realized. The premature child born in grief. Vivian's chest tightened. He hadn't asked for recognition. He hadn't demanded anything. When the city froze, when every pilot was unavailable, he didn't flaunt his rank. He just said, "I can fly it." She opened a drawer, pulled out a sticky note, and wrote one name, Malik Bennett, then underlined it once, slowly because now she couldn't forget it. And suddenly, Vivian Cross, CEO, decision-maker, empire builder, had no idea what to do next. Vivian started noticing things she should have seen long ago. Malik never took the elevators, always the stairs, even after midnight. His uniform, grey with a faded company logo, was always clean but worn thin at the collar. He never lingered, never loitered. If you passed him in the hallway, you might forget he was even there by the time you reached the copy room. But once you knew what to look for, he was everywhere. One night, working late on investor reports, Vivian left her office to stretch her legs. The executive hall was quiet, soaked in shadows and the distant hum of elevators. That's when she saw him. Malik was kneeling beside a small pile of crumpled drawings. Beside him, sound asleep on a lobby bench, was his son, Leo. The boy's blonde curls were wild, his tiny sneakered feet dangling above the floor. A crayon sat loose in one hand. Malik gently picked up the drawings. A helicopter, a rocket, something that looked like a spaceship with rotors, and slid them back into Leo's red backpack. Vivian watched him cover Leo with a folded hoodie, gently brushing the hair from the boy's forehead. Then he sat on the floor beside the bench, arms on his knees, head lowered, not tired exactly. Just heavy. She should have turned away. But she didn't. Later that week, she saw them again in the stairwell, Malik holding Leo's hand, both quiet, climbing together floor by floor. No stroller. No details missed. When Leo stumbled, Malik was already there. Vivian realized something crystal clear. Malik hadn't disappeared because he was broken. He disappeared because he was protecting something delicate, his peace, his child. The last precious piece of a family he'd nearly lost. She thought of all the boardrooms she'd conquered, all the rooms she'd walked into with armor and ambition. And not one of them had taken as much courage as Malik Bennett carried without saying a word. Vivian returned to her office that night, untouched by any numbers or contracts, because now her thoughts were no longer chasing success. They were orbiting a janitor who flew helicopters and held his son like both of them were made of glass. Vivian Cross didn't linger in lobbies. She didn't wait around for anyone, ever. But that night, she sat quietly in the leather chair near the front entrance, pretending to read something on her tablet as midnight crept past. The building was nearly empty, the usual corporate hum reduced to silence, except for the occasional click of distant cleaning carts. She was waiting for him at exactly 12:08 a.m. The stairwell door swung open. Malik Bennett walked through with a sleeping Leo draped over his shoulder, the boy's arms loose around his father's neck. His little backpack bounced softly against Malik's back with each step. Vivian stood up. "Malik," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. He turned slowly, surprised. "Ms. Cross, no need for the formality," she said, and offered a soft smile. "Vivian's fine." His brow lifted slightly as he adjusted Leo's weight. "Did something happen?" "No," she said quickly. I never thanked you. For the flight the other morning." She met his eyes. "You saved that deal," he nodded. "It was nothing. It wasn't nothing," she pressed gently. "That wasn't just basic flying, Malik. That was second nature, military grade." His jaw tightened. "It used to be my life. A different one." She looked at him carefully. "Why hide it?" He shrugged. "Most people don't see past the uniform." "You mean the janitors?" He nodded. Vivian took a small breath. "I saw your son drawing helicopters last week in the lobby. He told me you were the best pilot in the world." That made Malik pause. His eyes softened. "He believes that," she added. "I wish I did," he replied quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was honest. Vivian glanced at Leo, his head resting peacefully on Malik's shoulder. Then back to the man himself. "You're doing a damn good job," she said softly. Malik looked away, but not before she saw the flicker of emotion cross his face. Something between gratitude and grief. Thanks," he said. Then more gently, "Have a good night, Vivian." And just like that he walked away, but her heart was still standing there, rooted to the floor. Rain pattered gently against the windows of the simulator bay, thin streaks trailing down glass that towered above the department's empty floor. The rest of CrossFlight's executive wing had gone quiet for the night, but the old flight rig, long pushed into a corner like forgotten tech, was lit. Humming low in standby, Vivian wouldn't have gone down there, except she'd forgotten her tablet in the conference room and taken the back hallway. What she found instead was something she wasn't meant to see. Malik was inside the simulator, alone, strapped in, helmet off, fingers resting on the collective like it still mattered. But his head was down, chest shaking, eyes wet, not sobbing. Not loudly, no sound at all. Vivian stood behind the glass, frozen. It was a long time before he noticed her. When he finally opened the door and stepped out, he didn't flinch, didn't pretend. He just looked at her like a man caught bleeding in a place no one was supposed to look. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't know anyone was here. I wasn't trying to find you," she said quickly. I forgot something." He gave a tired nod, running a hand through his hair. "It's nothing. Sometimes it hits different at night." Vivian hesitated. "I know your wife died." Malik's posture stiffened. "Who told you?" "I looked into your file. After the flight," she admitted. "I needed to know who you really were." He nodded slowly, then looked past her, eyes distant. "She was 8 months pregnant. Driving home on a wet highway? I was in Afghanistan doing reconnaissance." His voice cracked. "I wasn't there. I couldn't protect her." Vivian didn't speak. She knew that kind of guilt. The kind that whispered, "If only in your ear at 2 a.m. "I left the service when Leo was born," he continued. "Premature, underweight, he lived. She didn't." His throat tightened. "I couldn't fly after that. Every time I looked at a cockpit, I saw her. Heard her last voicemail." Vivian stepped closer, her eyes soft. "You're the reason your son's alive. You chose him." "I disappeared," Malik whispered, more to himself than her. "I didn't know how to be anything anymore." She stared at him, her voice barely a breath. "You never disappeared, Malik. You just started flying lower, quieter, but you were never gone." It was the first time someone had told him that, and for a moment, he almost believed her. The elevator ride back to the executive floor was silent. Vivian stood beside Malik, arms crossed, the soft hum of the motor the only sound between them. But silence didn't feel like avoidance anymore. It felt like space being held, room created for truth to echo between them. When the elevator doors parted, Malik started to step out, then paused. "You didn't have to come find me," he said softly. "I didn't," she replied. "Not intentionally. But I'm not sorry that I did." Instead of walking away, she turned toward the windows that stretched across the quiet lobby. Seattle glowed beyond them, steel and shadow, neon and night. "I haven't told many people this," she began, "but I was engaged once." Malik looked over, surprised. His name was Damien. "We dated through college, my early years at the company. Everyone thought he was perfect. Including me, I think." Vivian's voice was quiet, measured, but each sentence pulled something loose from inside her. "When my father died, I became CEO overnight. I stepped into a boardroom filled with men, twice my age, all ready to doubt me. I had no choice but to harden." She turned to face Malik. "And on that very day, after the funeral no less, Damien told me he couldn't do it. Said he'd never signed up to be second to a company. Or second to me." Malik's jaw tightened slightly. "He walked out with everything but the ring." Vivian exhaled. "So I decided something. I would never be second. Never soft, never distracted." She met his eyes. "But it turns out there's a price for building walls so high." Malik held her gaze for a long time. "You don't look distracted now," he said quietly. "I'm not," she whispered. "But for the first time in years, I feel lighter. And maybe it's because someone finally saw past my uniform." Neither spoke again, but when they parted ways that night, their silence said everything. For the first time, she wasn't alone in the building, and neither was he. The email came on a Tuesday morning. Vivian was halfway through her second cup of coffee, reviewing mock-ups for CrossFlight's new urban transport prototype, when Benji poked his head through the door. "You've got a message you should probably see," he said, a little breathless. "From Skycore." Not about the contract, something else. She opened the email without much thought, until her eyes caught the subject line. Request for Captain Malik Bennett. Flight demonstration proposal. Her pulse skipped. Attached was a formal invite from SkyCorps' Executive Aviation Division. Addressed not to her, not to CrossFlight, but directly to Malik. They had tracked him down through aviation chatter after hearing who had flown Vivian across the city on the morning of the critical signing. Word had spread after one of the SkyCorps executives, the CTO, mentioned the flight in a podcast interview. Their proposal was clear. A. Live demonstration at SkyCorps' annual Aerospace Innovation. Summit pilot Malik Bennett honorarium. Generous purpose, investor showcase. Plus media coverage. And one more thing, a full educational scholarship package for Leo Bennett, Vivian. Read the last line twice. She leaned back slowly, letting the weight of it settle. When Malik arrived that evening for his shift, still wearing the same muted uniform, she called him into her office, not as an employer, not as a CEO, but as someone who now saw what the world nearly missed. I got something for you, she said. Sliding the email across the desk, Malik scanned it quickly, shoulders tightening as he read. Then he looked up. Why are they offering me this? Because you're still a pilot, she said simply. Whether you want to be or not. He was quiet for a long time. Leo could go to any school in the state. His voice trailed off. But you'd have to be seen again, Vivian finished. You'd have to come out of hiding. He looked down at his hands, hands that once flew soldiers home, hands that now carried crayons and old grief. I don't know if that version of me still exists, he said honestly. Vivian reached across the desk, her voice soft. Then let's find out. The spotlight hadn't even turned on, but Malik could already feel the heat. For 3 nights in a row, he'd barely slept. The SkyCorps proposal sat printed and folded on his kitchen table, right next to Leo's half-finished math worksheet and a jam-smudged glass of orange juice. It felt like a contract written for a man who didn't exist anymore. He'd walked away from that world. Walked away from loud conferences and press kits and interviews. People had once called him Captain Bennett. Now they said, hey, you missed a spot, but Leo had read the words full scholarship out loud in his tiny, excited voice, not understanding what it meant, but knowing somehow it was something good. And Malik had smiled, but his chest had felt heavy. Could he really go back? Upstairs, pressure of a different kind pressed against Vivian's world. She was in the lobby when he arrived. August Cross. Her father, her predecessor, and the man who'd built CrossFlight from the dust of World War II aircraft molds. I heard about the janitor, he said flatly. His name is Malik, Vivian replied. Lifting her chin, August's smile was cold. Doesn't matter what you call him. He doesn't belong here. Vivian squared her shoulders. He flew my aircraft when no one else could. He saved the biggest deal of the year, and now you're parading him around for PR? August's eyes narrowed. Or something else. Vivian's voice dropped. He's more than whatever version of him you've invented in your head. August stepped closer. He's a ghost from a war, with a mop, a child, and no future. Don't hang your name on someone who's already stepped off the ledge. Vivian met his gaze without blinking. Maybe it's time someone pulled him back. And for the first time that day, August Cross had nothing to say. The simulator room was quiet when Malik walked in. No janitorial cart this time. No cleaning supplies. Just his body in the doorway, hands clenched at his sides, staring at the sleek curve of the outdated cockpit like it might accuse him of forgetting. But it didn't. It just waited. He stepped closer, breath-catching as his fingers brushed the cold edge of the hatch. It was familiar. Too familiar. His chest ached, with the kind of recognition that comes after years of silence. Muscle memory tingled in his forearms. His vision blurred, not from fear, but memory. The day Sarah died, he'd been in a cockpit just like this, watching the map, eyes on grid coordinates. Not her, not the road slicked with rain, not the truck that drifted across the lane. She was gone before he could land. He exhaled shakily. Climbing into the simulation pod was the hardest thing he'd done since burying her. But he did it. The moment his hands wrapped around the controls, something clicked. His posture shifted. The screen flickered to life, filling the cockpit with blinking light and synthetic sky. He didn't start the session. He didn't need to fly. Sitting there, Malik finally understood. He hadn't lost the pilot in him. He'd just buried him under grief. And maybe now, after 5 long years flying low, it was time to rise again. Vivian stood at the edge of the glass-walled conference room, watching Malik through the window as he stepped out of the simulator bay. He looked different now. Not in appearance, same uniform, same steady stride, but in presence. Like someone who had remembered how to take up space. Even if only a little. She met him at the hallway corner, a manila folder clutched in her hands. "I know it's fast," she said without preamble, "but I wanted you to see this before the board gets wind of it." Malik raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "A formal consulting contract," Vivian said. "Part-time. 6 months. You'd work with our engineering team and Sky Corps to help design and refine the next-gen flight sim systems." Her voice steadied. "It's not mopping floors. It's what you were born to do." He looked at the folder. "But didn't take it. Why me?" he asked softly. "You have hundreds of qualified people on payroll. None of them flew a mission blind across a city to save a contract and never asked for a single thing in return," she said. He was quiet for a long time. "Then what about the rest of them? What will they think? What does your father think?" Vivian gave a small smile, hard and honest. "My father thinks I'm making a mistake," she said. "Just like he thought founding a company in his garage was a mistake. He's wrong. Again." Malik finally took the folder. He held it like it weighed more than paper. "You don't have to say yes," Vivian added. "But the skies missed you, Malik, and maybe you missed them too." Their eyes met, not as CEO and janitor, but as 2 people who had both stepped out of old skins. "I'll think about it," he said, and for the first time, it felt like he meant it. The week before the Sky Corps demonstration, Malik found himself walking through the city with Leo, the boy's small hand wrapped tightly in his own. The world felt different, brighter somehow, as if the possibility of flight had colored everything with hope. Leo chatted about helicopters and drew imaginary flight paths in the air with his free hand. But as they turned the corner near their apartment, Malik froze. A man stood by the stoop, hands in his pockets, eyes sharp with recognition. Sergeant Tom Reyes, his old crew chief from the army. Malik hadn't seen him since the funeral. "Bennett," Tom called, voice low but steady. Leo looked up, sensing the tension. Malik nodded, wary. "Tom." Tom's gaze flicked to Leo, then back. "Didn't expect to find you here. Word is you're flying again. For Sky Corps, no less." Malik's jaw tightened. "Just 1 flight for my son." Tom stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You sure you're ready? Last time you were in a cockpit, you nearly broke apart. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Malik. Not after what you did." Malik felt the old shame and grief rise, but this time he didn't look away. "I'm not doing it for them, or for the medals. I'm doing it for Leo. He deserves to see his father as more than a shadow." Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then make it count. Don't let the past fly this one for you." As Tom walked away, Malik knelt beside Leo, brushing a curl from his son's forehead. "You ready to see me fly, buddy?" Leo grinned, eyes shining. "You're the best pilot in the world, Dad." Malik smiled, the weight of old shadows lifting just a little. For the first time in years, he believed it might be true. The Sky Corps airfield buzzed with anticipation. Rows of executives, engineers, and investors filled the viewing stands, their eyes fixed on the gleaming helicopter at the center of the tarmac. Malik stood beside it, his flight suit crisp, his hands steady, at least on the outside. Inside, his heart pounded with a cocktail of nerves and hope. Vivian found him just before the demonstration, her presence grounding. She handed him a headset, her fingers brushing his. "You don't have to prove anything," she said quietly. "Just fly." He nodded, glancing over her shoulder to where Leo stood with Benji, clutching a pair of oversized aviator sunglasses and waving with both hands. Malik's chest tightened with pride and love. The announcer's voice echoed across the field, introducing Captain Malik Bennett, decorated Army pilot. The crowd applauded, but Malik barely heard them. He climbed into the cockpit, the familiar scent of oil and leather wrapping around him like an old friend. As the rotors spun to life, Malik closed his eyes for a moment, letting the vibration settle his nerves. He pictured Sarah's smile, Leo's laughter, Vivian's steady gaze. Then he opened his eyes and lifted off. The helicopter rose smoothly, sunlight glinting off the blades. Malik guided it through a series of maneuvers, precision turns, hovering holds, a gentle arc that drew gasps from the crowd. Every movement was deliberate, confident, and free. On the ground, Leo jumped up and down, shouting, "That's my dad! That's my dad!" Vivian wiped a tear from her cheek, her heart soaring with him. When Malik touched down, the applause was thunderous. He stepped out, breathless, and Leo ran into his arms. Vivian met his eyes, her smile radiant. For the first time in years, Malik felt whole. He had flown not just for the crowd, but for his son, for Vivian, and for himself. And as the sun broke through the clouds, he knew this was only the beginning. The applause still echoed in Malik's ears as the crowd began to disperse, but the world felt quieter now, softer, as if the noise had faded to make room for something more important. Leo clung to his side, beaming, his small hand gripping Malik's flight suit with fierce pride. Vivian approached, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She didn't say anything at first, just reached out and squeezed Malik's hand. The gesture said everything words couldn't. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Malik looked down at Leo, then back at Vivian. "We did it," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Leo tugged at his sleeve. "Does this mean you're going to fly all the time now, Dad?" Malik knelt to meet his son's eyes. "It means I'm not hiding anymore. Not from flying, not from life, and not from you." Vivian crouched beside them, her hand resting on Leo's shoulder. "You know, Leo, your dad's not the only brave one here." Leo grinned, glancing between them. "Are we a team now?" Malik and Vivian exchanged a look, one filled with hope, gratitude, and something deeper. Malik nodded. "Yeah, buddy, we're a team." The three of them stood together on the edge of the tarmac, sunlight warming their faces, the future wide open before them. For the first time in a long time, Malik felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the lightness of possibility. Together, they were ready to take on whatever came next. The city glowed gold as evening settled over Seattle. Malik stood on the cross-flight rooftop, the same helipad where everything had changed. The helicopter gleamed in the fading light, but tonight it was just a backdrop. Vivian stepped out onto the roof, her hair loose for once, her heels silent on the concrete. She found Malik waiting, Leo beside him, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. Malik smiled, nerves flickering in his eyes. "I thought it was time we made a new memory up here." Vivian's lips curved. No mops, no sarcasm. "Just us?" He nodded, then knelt, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring, engraved with two tiny wings. "I used to fly for my country," Malik said, voice steady. "But now I want to fly for you, for Leo, for us, if you'll have me." Vivian's breath caught. She looked at Leo, who grinned and nodded, then back at Malik, her heart full. "Yes," she whispered, tears bright in her eyes. 1,000 times yes. Malik slipped the ring onto her finger, rising to pull her into his arms. Leo cheered, waving his flowers in the air. As the sun dipped below the skyline, the three of them stood together, a family forged by loss, courage, and second chances. Above them, the sky stretched wide and open, waiting for their next flight. A year later, the rooftop was no longer just a place of hurried departures and tense negotiations. It had become a sanctuary, a place where laughter echoed, where Leo's drawings fluttered in the breeze, and where Malik and Vivian often found themselves watching the city lights together, hand in hand. Malik had taken on his new role as a flight consultant, splitting his time between CrossFlight's engineering team and the non-profit he'd started to teach underprivileged kids the basics of aviation. Leo, now thriving in his new school, had made friends and filled his notebooks with even more ambitious flying machines. Vivian, too, had changed. She still ran CrossFlight with her signature precision, but her edges had softened. She left the office earlier, spent weekends with Malik and Leo, and sometimes even let herself be second, if only to let love lead the way. On the anniversary of that fateful rooftop flight, the three of them gathered at sunset. Malik lifted Leo into the cockpit, Vivian beside him, and together they soared above Seattle, the city bathed in gold. As the helicopter banked gently over the Sound, Leo's laughter filled the cabin. Vivian leaned her head on Malik's shoulder, her heart finally at peace. Below them, the city stretched out like a promise. Above, the sky was endless. For the first time, they weren't running from the past. They were flying toward everything the future could hold, together. And in that moment, with the world spread wide beneath their wings, they knew they were finally home.